I have always believed that the heart is a poor judge of what a woman needs to survive. Love speaks in whispers. Comfort makes promises you can touch. And in a land like Willow Creek, where winters bite and summers scorch, those promises matter. They mattered to me more than I'm proud to admit. Please click the subscribe button. My name is Harper Quinn, and this is the story of how comfort saved me, ruined me, and forced me to reckon with the truth I spent most of my life avoiding. It began on the coldest night of the year. The storm rolled in from the northern ridge like a living thing. Violent, impatient, hungry. Snow slapped against the windows of the cabin, the wind howling so loud it drowned the crackle of the fireplace. I stood at the kitchen sink, fingers stiff from washing dishes, staring out into the white blur. The trees bent under the weight of the wind, and the old barn, my husband's barn, looked like it was praying to survive the night. Tom wasn't home. He had called earlier to say he'd be staying late at the construction site. Said they were behind schedule and the boss needed them to push through the evening. But I had spent years with Tom. I knew the tone he used when he wanted to sound like a man with responsibilities. The same tone he used when he was lying. He wasn't working overtime. He was with her. I dried my hands slowly, letting the towel drag across my skin as though the friction could keep me grounded. The truth had a way of making the room feel smaller, the air tighter. I listened to the storm rage outside and wondered if Tom felt even an ounce of guilt as he tucked his shirt back into his jeans and whispered into someone else's ear. The clock ticked. The fire hissed. And then came the knock. 3 sharp hits. Urgent. Unmistakable. Froze. Nobody knocks during a storm like this unless they're desperate. Or dangerous. I walked toward the door, heartbeat in my throat. The wind rattled the hinges as I pulled it open. And then I saw him. Cole Maddox. Standing on my porch like a ghost from the life I could have chosen. His hat was dusted with snow, his jacket soaked through. His face red from the cold. But his eyes, those soft, stubborn eyes, hadn't changed. "Evenin', Harper," he said, voice low, breath fogging the air. I didn't answer. Couldn't. My tongue was stuck somewhere between shock and memory. I stepped aside, and he brushed past me into the cabin, dripping snow onto the wooden floor. "What are you doing here?" finally asked. He removed his hat, shook off the snow, and stared into the fire. Storm got worse faster than expected. Trucks slid off the road down by Miller's Creek. Walked the rest of the way. Yours was the closest house with lights on. I crossed my arms. You could have gone to the Jenkins. They moved to Arizona last spring. But I had forgotten. I forgot a lot these days, especially things I should have remembered. Cole looked older. Not in a bad way. Rougher, like the world had sanded down his edges but couldn't quite break him. He was the kind of man who carried stories in his posture. And once, long ago, he had carried me too. "How long can you stay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "As long as the storm wants me to," he said with a half smile. "Or as long as you'll let me." That last part struck deeper than it should have. The wind howled. The lights flickered. Cole walked to the fire and stretched out his hands. "You look tired," he said softly without turning around. "I'm fine." "You're not." I hated that he knew me well enough to say that. Hated even more that he was right. I busied myself by grabbing an extra quilt, pretending I didn't see the way his eyes followed me. Pretending I didn't feel the old ache between us, the one I had buried under the weight of comfort. Comfort named Tom Quinn. Comfort that came in the shape of a steady paycheck, a mortgage approved on the first try, health insurance, a family that liked me, and a man who didn't break into pieces every time the world disappointed him. Tom was comfort. Cole was everything else. He was risk and heat and tenderness and uncertainty and a life built on nothing but a promise he couldn't guarantee. And I let him go. I placed the quilt on the couch. "You'll sleep here. The fire should last a few hours." Cole nodded. "Thank you." I turned to leave, desperate to get away from the memories he carried in his voice, but he spoke again before I reached the hallway. "Harper." "Stop. You look unhappy." My throat tightened. "Cole, don't." "Don't what?" His voice was soft. Usof. Don't notice. Don't care. Don't ask questions you don't have a right to ask. He stepped closer, not enough to touch but close enough to feel. I had a right once. You lost it. No, he whispered. You gave it away. I didn't respond. Couldn't. The truth can be cruel when spoken out loud. I walked down the hallway and closed the bedroom door softly behind me, pressing my forehead against the wood. The storm outside thrashed against the cabin, but the storm inside me was louder. Cole Maddox, my almost forever, was sleeping in my living room. Tom, my choice of comfort, was God knows where. And me. I was standing in the dark, wondering why comfort suddenly felt like a cage. Hardly slept. The storm quieted sometime after midnight, settling into a dull roar instead of a full-blown war. But my mind didn't. I tossed and turned under the quilt, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound from the living room. Part of me prayed Cole was already asleep. The other part prayed he wasn't. Around 3 a.m., the wind finally died down enough that the house stopped shuddering. I sat up, wrapped my robe around my shoulders, and crept down the hallway. The cabin was dim, lit only by the flickering embers of the dying fire. And there he was, fast asleep on the couch. Or at least I thought he was, until his voice stirred the air. You always walked like a ghost when you didn't want to be heard. I froze on the final step. His eyes opened slowly, catching the faint glow of orange light. He wasn't smiling, but something gentle softened his face. Couldn't sleep, he asked. I shook my head. No. He sat up, rubbing a hand along the back of his neck. Storm always made you restless. You remember that. He shrugged lightly. I remember everything. Those words went straight through me like a warm blade. I moved toward the fire and crouched down to add another log. The sparks flared up, casting brighter shadows across the room. Cole watched me, quiet, as though afraid a wrong word might spook me. You didn't have to get up, I said. You didn't either. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of things unsaid pressing against my chest. What happened to the truck? I asked, trying to shift the conversation into safer territory. Skidded into a ditch. Might need a tow, might need a funeral service. Hard to say with that old thing. Why didn't you call someone? Highway patrol. No service out there. And anyway, he looked at me meaningfully. I knew your place wasn't far. The way he said it stole a breath from my lungs. Cole, I whispered, unsure of what I was warning him or myself against. You don't have to talk, he said, voice soft. Just sit with me a minute. I hesitated. Then I sat. Not beside him on the couch. No, that would have been too much. But on the floor near the fire, knees pulled to my chest. He stayed on the couch, leaning forward, elbows on his thighs, hands clasped. For a moment neither of us spoke. A moment later he broke the silence. Are you happy, Harper? The question hit me like a fist. Why would you ask that? Because looking at you tonight feels like watching someone drowning with a boat tied to their ankle. I swallowed hard. That's not fair. It's not meant to be fair. It's meant to be true. My lips trembled, so I pressed them together. Cole leaned back slowly. I'm not here to make trouble. I'm not here to remind you of things you've worked hard to forget. I'm just... He paused, searching for the right words. I'm just trying to understand what happened. You know what happened, I whispered. Do I? I looked into the fire. My voice shook when I answered. You were the man I loved. And the man I couldn't depend on. His breath hitched. Just barely. But I heard it. You wanted to chase sunsets, I continued. To make music. To travel. To live free. I wanted stability. Home. Something solid under my feet. And Tom gave you that, Cole murmured. He nodded. He did. Did it cost you everything? Closed my eyes. The fire popped. Outside, the storm groaned against the last of the night. It cost me some things, I finally said. He watched me like he was memorizing the cracks in me. What about Tom? He asked quietly. Does he make you feel safe? Yes. Seen. Sometimes. Loved. My voice barely escaped. I don't know. Cole leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You know I never meant to hurt you. I know. And I would have done better for you if you'd asked me to. I shouldn't have needed to ask, I whispered. He nodded slowly. You're right. Silence folded over us again, thicker this time. The fire warmed my skin, but something inside me felt cold. Cole stood up. I stiffened instinctively, but all he did was retrieve the quilt from the back of the couch. You're shaking, he murmured. I'm fine, I lied. You're never fine when you say you're fine. He draped the quilt gently over my shoulders, his hands brushing the sides of my neck. The contact was soft, fleeting, but it lit something in me I thought had died years ago. Comfort never felt like that. He lingered for half a second too long. Or maybe I leaned in just a fraction too much. Then he pulled away. Get some rest, he said. I'll be here in the morning. I watched him lower himself back onto the couch, turning away as though protecting both of us. I stared at the fire until my eyes blurred. I didn't sleep. And for the first time in years, I didn't want morning to come. Morning came in shades of pale gold and quiet regret. The storm had settled during the early hours, leaving Willow Creek wrapped in a white blanket so thick the world looked brand new, and too honest. Sunlight cut across the living room in long beams, glowing against the frost on the windows. I stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the coffee maker like it was the only thing keeping me upright. My hands shook every time I reached for something. I told myself it was the cold. It wasn't the cold. Cole was still on the couch, lying on his back, one arm draped over his forehead. The quilt had slipped to the floor sometime during the night. His shirt had ridden up just enough to show a faint scar near his hip, one I remembered tracing when the world felt simpler. I turned away quickly, flipping on the coffee machine. The smell filled the room, warm and grounding. I gripped the counter tighter than I should have, as if I needed to hold on to something real. Behind me I heard movement. Morning, he murmured, voice rough with sleep. Morning, I replied without turning. Beep. You made coffee. Yeah. Smells the same. A hint of a smile colored his words. You still use the dark roast from that tiny shop on Main? I do. Silence stretched between us, a thick, unspoken thing full of memory. Finally I faced him. He sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair. He looked like a man who had slept in a stranger's home but dreamed in familiar rooms. And for a moment, just a moment, I let myself admire him. How's the road? He asked, nodding toward the window. Blocked. Snow's deep. They won't plow the ridge until noon. So I'm stuck here. Seems like it. A warmth, dangerous, quiet, unwanted, settled in the room. He watched me long enough to see through me. Harper, he said softly. You've been crying. I swallowed hard. No, I haven't. Your eyes tell on you. I looked away. It's been a long night. And even longer years. My chest tightened. Don't. Please don't do this. Do what? Care? He asked, voice breaking just enough to betray him. I steadied myself with a long breath. We don't need to dig up the past. I'm not digging, he murmured. I'm standing right on top of it. You are too. His honesty, raw and unpolished, cut through the room. I poured coffee into 2 mugs. He came beside me, close enough that the heat from his body reached me before his hand did. When he took the mug, our fingers brushed. Static. Memory. Everything I had buried. He didn't apologize. He didn't need to. Instead, he leaned on the counter, sipping slowly. So, where's Tom this morning? The question stiffened the air instantly. He's at work, I said carefully. At dawn. On a snow-covered Sunday. I didn't answer. He didn't press, but I felt his eyes on me. Felt the weight of what he wasn't saying. Finally he spoke again. I'm sorry, Harper. My throat tightened. For what? For not being the man you needed. For making you choose between loving me and living safely. I looked up. His expression carried years of apology. I never wanted you to sacrifice anything, he whispered. He didn't understand. You weren't the thing I sacrificed, I said quietly. I was. The words tore out of me before I could swallow them back. Cole's face softened in a way that made my knees feel weak. I stepped away instinctively, putting distance between us before my mouth said something I couldn't take back. He let me. But fate didn't. Because that was the moment the front door swung open. Cold air burst inside. Snow gusted across the floorboards. Tom stood in the doorway. And the moment his eyes landed on Cole, something in him turned sharp, like a blade awakened. What the hell is going on here? Tom demanded, his voice tight, angry, confused. My stomach dropped. Cole stood straighter but didn't move. Didn't hide. Didn't explain himself. He just watched Tom with calm, steady eyes. Morning, Cole said evenly. Tom slammed the door shut. I wasn't talking to you. His eyes landed on me, stormier than the night before. Harper, he said, voice low. Why is he in our house? My lips parted, but no words came out. Tom looked between us. The two mugs on the counter, the quilt on the couch, my robe still wrapped around me, my face still swollen from unshed tears. A conclusion formed in his mind. Wrong one. Or maybe not wrong at all. He stepped closer, jaw clenched. Did something happen here? He asked. Cole stepped forward. Not aggressively but protectively. No, he said firmly. Nothing happened. Tom's eyes cut to me. Harper. I couldn't speak. Not out of guilt, but out of exhaustion. Out of the weight of a marriage built on comfort but not truth. Out of the ache of seeing the difference between a man who noticed me and a man who only noticed the idea of me. Tom exhaled sharply. You know what? I'm going to work. We'll talk when I get back. He grabbed the door handle, then paused. His voice was quiet, too quiet. You look different this morning, he said. I don't know what changed, but I don't like it. Then he walked out, leaving the cold where warmth should have been. The door shut. Silence filled the cabin. Cole turned to me slowly. You okay? He asked. He nodded. But my voice told the truth. No, I whispered. Tom's truck rumbled away down the frosted road, spitting snow in its wake. The sound faded, but the tension he left behind hung in the cabin like smoke after a gunshot. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, the cold from the open door still clinging to my skin. My robe felt too thin. My breath too loud. My heart too exposed. Cole was the first to break the silence. Harper. His voice was low, steady, too steady, like he was afraid one wrong move would shatter me. But I was already breaking. I'm fine, I whispered, though the tremble in my voice betrayed me. He didn't argue. He never argued with the lie of my strength. He just watched me with that quiet patience he once carried like a promise. You should sit, he said gently. I shook my head. I can't. Why? Because the moment I sat, the truth would settle on me like dust, and I'd have to face what I'd been running from for years. But I didn't say that. I just wrapped my arms tighter around myself. The kitchen smelled like coffee, but beneath it lingered the sharp scent of confrontation, a scent I knew too well. Cole stepped closer. Harper, talk to me. There's nothing to talk about, I lied again. His eyes softened. Your husband walked in and looked at you like you were a stranger. Something happened long before I got here. I let out a shaking breath. He doesn't trust me, I finally said. Does he have a reason not to? The question didn't carry judgment, only concern, but it still stung. No, I said, voice cracking. He doesn't. Cole nodded slowly. He didn't push. Didn't pry. That was one thing about him. He never forced truth out of me. He let me give it when I had the strength. I usually didn't. He moved toward the window, pulled back the curtain, and stared at the road Tom had driven away on. How long has it been like this? He asked without looking at me. I swallowed hard. A while. What changed? Nothing, I said softly. That's the problem. Nothing ever changes. Cole turned, leaning one shoulder against the wall. That's not comfort, Harper. That's stagnation. Closed my eyes. He spoke again. Comfort isn't supposed to hurt. I sank into the nearest chair. My body felt heavy, too heavy. Like the truth had weight and I'd been hauling it uphill for years. Cole stayed back, giving me space. You chose comfort, he said quietly, because you needed safety. You needed someone steady. I needed a life I could rely on, I said, staring at my hands. A roof that didn't leak. Bills that got paid. A man who never forgot my birthday. Someone who wouldn't run off chasing dreams and leave me wondering if I mattered. And you think I would have left? He asked. I looked up, meeting his eyes. You left 3 times while we were together, I said. Once for a job. Once for your brother. Once because you said you needed air. You didn't even say goodbye that last time. His jaw clenched. A flash of regret crossed his face. I didn't know what I wanted back then. I didn't know how to love. Not right. And now you do. He didn't answer immediately. Now I know what I lost, he said softly. The words slid into me like heat under ice. Dangerous. Familiar. I looked away quickly. Harper, do you love him? He asked. The question felt like stepping barefoot into a memory I wasn't ready for. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. I care about him, I finally whispered. That's not what I asked. My voice broke. I don't know, Cole. I don't know what I feel anymore. He nodded, jaw tightening as though holding back everything he wanted to say. The clock ticked loudly between us. Finally, he walked over to the fireplace, crouched, and poked at the embers with the iron rod. We should get the truck, he said, as though shifting us into safer territory. Once the road's clear. I'd rather not leave it in a ditch forever. The shift was gentle, but I felt the meaning beneath it. He wasn't trying to take me back. He wasn't trying to break my marriage. He was trying not to make things harder for me than they already were. And somehow that hurt more. I stood slowly. You want breakfast? I have eggs. He shook his head. No. You look like you're about to pass out. I exhaled shakily. Cole, I don't need. You do, he said softly. And it's okay. My throat tightened. I sat back down. He moved to the kitchen, rolling up his sleeves. Where do you keep your pans? Second cabinet. Same as always, he said under his breath with a faint smile. I watched him move around my kitchen with a familiarity that felt both comforting and cruel. Comfort. There it was again. The very thing I had sacrificed everything else for. And yet, here I was, sitting in silence, watching the man I once loved cook eggs in my kitchen while my husband drove away angry. Hit me then. Comfort wasn't a pillow. It wasn't a roof. It wasn't safety. Comfort was a prison when the walls were built from fear. And I had been locked inside for years. Cole turned, spatula in hand. You sure you're all right? No, I whispered, finally telling the truth. No, I'm not. The smell of eggs drifted through the kitchen, warm and familiar. So painfully familiar it felt like a memory instead of a moment. Cole cracked the yolks with the same gentle wrist he used to have back when he'd cook for me in his tiny apartment above the old saddle shop. He wasn't smiling, but something quiet softened his face, like he was steadying himself against everything unspoken between us. I sat at the table, hands wrapped around a warm mug even though the coffee had gone cold. My heartbeat felt like a slow, heavy knock inside my chest, steady but impossible to ignore. Breakfast, Cole said softly as he slid a plate in front of me. Thank you. He nodded and sat on the opposite chair, not too close, and not far enough. Took a bite. The eggs were simple, but something about them tasted like the life I'd almost had. A life where I didn't measure every choice by survival, where love didn't feel like a luxury I couldn't afford. But life wasn't simple for women like me. Women who learned early that stability was earned, not given. Women raised on the kind of lessons whispered over kitchen sinks. Love won't pay your medical bills. Love won't fix the roof. Love won't save you when life gets hard. My mother drilled those truths into me until they sat under my skin like scars. But she never warned me what comfort could cost. Cole watched me with careful eyes. You don't have to pretend with me. I'm not. You are, he said gently. His voice felt like a hand brushing across my bones, trying to soothe something it didn't know how to heal. I pushed the plate away slightly. Tom thinks something's going on. Cole leaned back a little. Is there? No, I said quickly, too quickly. He didn't react. Didn't smirk. Didn't push. Harper, he murmured. Your marriage seems like a thin door holding back a flood. I'm not trying to open it. But I can tell it's leaking. I dragged in a shaky breath. We were doing better. Or at least I thought we were. What changed? You showed up, I said before I could stop myself. His expression shifted, just barely, but enough to reveal the truth he hid behind his eyes. He wished things were different. He wished we were different. He wished he had been enough when it mattered. He looked down at his hands. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make your life harder. You didn't, I whispered. Life did that on its own. He studied me, eyes full of something tender and restrained. Harper, tell me something honest. My breath caught. What? Where does your heart go when no one's looking? I felt the question in my ribs. Don't do this, I whispered. It's just a question. It's not just anything. You know it's not. He stayed silent, waiting, not demanding, not prying, just waiting. Cole, I whispered, voice trembling. My heart goes where it shouldn't. His jaw tightened. To me. I didn't respond. And my silence was an answer. He closed his eyes for a long moment, inhaling slowly like he was trying to steady himself. When he opened them again, his voice had changed, lower, weighted. I'm not here to take you back, he said. I'm not asking you to leave your husband. I'm not asking you for anything. Then what are you asking for? Truth, he whispered. Because lying to yourself isn't saving you anymore. A hot tear slipped down my cheek, surprising me. I wiped it away quickly. You think I don't know that? I whispered. You think I don't feel the cracks? Every day. Every night. You think I don't know I chose the life that hurt less instead of the life that meant more? His voice softened. You chose the life that promised to keep you safe. And does it? The question came out of me without warning, like a wound breaking open. I blinked, breath shaking. No, I whispered. It doesn't. Cole's eyes glistened with a pain he didn't hide. Harper, what happened between you and Tom? I leaned back, staring at the wooden grain of the table. He got distant, I said softly. Quiet. Started staying late. Started making decisions without me. Thought it was stress. I thought maybe I wasn't enough anymore. You're more than enough, Cole said quietly. So quietly it almost felt like a prayer. I swallowed hard. And then I found out there was someone else. Cole froze. Completely. He cheated on you. I nodded, tears burning hot behind my eyes. I confronted him. He apologized, said it was a mistake, said it was nothing. Said he was trying to fill a void. Cole's voice went hoarse. A void he created. He promised to change, I whispered. And I stayed because comfort felt safer than starting over. He finished for me. I shook my head, crying quietly now. No, because I didn't want to admit I traded love for stability. And ended up losing both. The room went painfully still. Cole reached across the table, not touching my hand, but close enough that I could feel the warmth. You didn't lose love, he said softly. You just buried it. I looked up, and for the first time in years I let myself see it. The man who had once held my heart without trying. The man I had walked away from because security seemed like the smarter choice. The man sitting in my kitchen now, looking at me like I was still the woman he loved. My voice cracked as the truth slipped out. Cole, I'm scared. Of what? That wanting you again makes me a terrible wife. His voice trembled. And what does staying in a half-broken marriage make you? I inhaled sharply. Trapped. He closed his eyes, pained. Harper. When he opened them, they were shining. Not with lust, not with impulse, but with something deeper. Wherever this goes, he whispered, I won't push you. I won't take advantage. I won't start something you aren't ready for. I nodded, tears falling freely. I know. But I need you to know one thing, he murmured. My breath held. I never stopped loving you. Not for one day. The room spun. My pulse roared. And the truth I had spent years denying rose from the ashes like something reborn. I had sacrificed love for comfort. And comfort had never loved me back. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my back staring at the warped wooden ceiling of my room, tracing the crooked lines with my eyes as if they carried answers. The desert wind moaned against the windows, and every sound felt too loud in the silence of my thoughts. I tried to push Daniel out of my head, but the harder I tried, the deeper he settled. His voice lingered like a stubborn echo, and so did the look on his face when he said I didn't belong to Copper Creek. No one had ever said I didn't belong, not even Henry. Maybe that was what frightened me most. By dawn, my throat was tight, my eyes were gritty, and my chest ached with something I couldn't name. When I stepped outside, Copper Creek was already alive. Miners gathered near the wagons, loading tools. The blacksmith hammered away with the force of 10 angry men. Dust floated in the morning sun like a golden haze. But even in all the noise, the town felt lonely. Or maybe the loneliness was in me. I walked toward Clara's bakery because the one thing I could rely on was a cinnamon roll warm enough to soften a bad morning. Or any morning, really. Clara took one look at me and sighed. Oh, child. You look like someone done stepped on your soul. I didn't sleep, I confessed. Clara slid a hot plate toward me and leaned her elbows on the counter. This have something to do with a certain sheriff? Maybe, I muttered. He chuckled. You ain't subtle. I stared at the cinnamon roll without touching it. He came to see me last night. That's so. Yes. And he told me I don't belong here. Clara didn't flinch. She wiped her hands on her apron and poured me a cup of coffee. Then he's right, she said with the bluntness only a woman who'd lived 3 lifetimes could dare. And blinked. You're supposed to comfort me. I am comfortin' you. Truth is comfort, just not always the flavor you want. What's that even mean? It means, she said, sliding into the chair across from me, you're a woman who keeps her heart in a box and her dreams in another. Copper Creek is fine for folks who either ain't got dreams or already buried them. Her words cut sharp not because they were harsh but because they felt too familiar. Too true. Clara softened her voice. You didn't come here to build a life. You came here to rest from one. I looked down at my hands. I just wanted peace. That's not peace, baby. That's hiding. I pressed my fingertips into my forehead. You're making it sound like I ran away. You did. My chest tightened. I didn't have a choice. You had a choice, Clara replied gently. You just chose the one that hurt less. I didn't answer because that sentence rang like a church bell in my soul. Clara reached across the table and squeezed my wrist. Look, I ain't saying you love Daniel. I'm saying your heart reacted to him in a way you can't pretend didn't happen. I swallowed. It doesn't matter. He'd never trust me. That's what he said. No. But he looked at me like I was dangerous. Clara laughed. Loud and unexpected. Honey, men only look at women like they're dangerous when they want him. My face flushed so fast I felt heat crawl up my neck. I don't know what I want, I whispered. That's fine. Figure it out. But don't do it by runnin'. I didn't have a response, and Clara didn't push one. She just stood, hugged me tightly, and whispered against my hair. Don't sacrifice your heart for comfort. Comfort don't last. By the time I left the bakery, I still didn't know where I belonged, but at least I understood the question better. As I stepped outside, the town buzzed with an unusual tension. Men huddled in clusters. Women whispered from porches. Horses stamped and shook their heads nervously. Something felt off. The sheriff's office door swung open, and Daniel stormed out, hitching his gun belt with urgency. His eyes swept the street, and locked onto mine instantly. My heart jolted. He started toward me with long, purposeful strides. Before he reached me, a miner rushed up to him. "Sheriff, you sure it was them?" the miner asked. Daniel didn't slow down. "I'll be sure when I have eyes on him myself." "What happened?" I asked as he reached me. "Stagecoach was attacked," he said, breath short. 3 miles out. "Looks like the Hollow Creek gang." My stomach dropped. "Anyone hurt?" "One passenger. Shot in the leg. Drivers missing." "Missing. Likely taken." He adjusted his saddlebag. "I'm tucking a few men to track them. I'd prefer you stay indoors." I bristled. "I'm not a child." "No," he said, leveling his gaze on mine. "You're a woman who jumps before she sees the ground." The words stung more because he wasn't wrong. "I can handle myself," I insisted. He stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my chin to meet his eyes. His voice lowered. "I'm not worried about you being able to handle yourself. I'm worried about you getting hurt before you figure out who you really are." My breath tangled in my throat. "Stay in town," he finished softly. "Please." It was the please that undid me. Before I could find my voice, he mounted his horse and turned to his men. "Let's move." They thundered off, dust rising behind them like a storm cloud. I watched until the dust settled. Watched until he became a speck on the horizon. Watched until he vanished completely. Then I whispered into the empty street, though no one heard. "I don't know who I am anymore." The rest of the day dragged like a wagon stuck in mud. Copper Creek felt wrong without Daniel. Too quiet, too watchful, as if the whole town held its breath. The miners worked slower. Business owners glanced toward the road every few minutes. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting. By late afternoon I couldn't focus on anything. Not sorting my books. Not cleaning my tiny kitchen. Not even pretending to nap. My mind kept drifting to Daniel riding after men who had nothing to lose. And I hated, truly hated, how much that scared me. Finally, after pacing a groove into my floorboards, I stepped outside just to stop thinking for a while. The sun hung low and orange, dripping fire across the horizon. The heat of the day softened into something gentler, but my heart remained tight. I walked toward the stables, needing the smell of hay and horses to ground me, and found old Sawyer brushing down a chestnut mare. He glanced up. "You look troubled." "I am troubled," I said honestly. "You worryin' about the sheriff." My mouth opened to deny it, but the lie died before it could form. Sawyer chuckled. "You don't need to answer. It's all over your face, missy." I let out a long sigh. "He went after the Hollow Creek gang." "They're cowards," Sawyer muttered. "Rats with guns. Sheriff will handle 'em. He always does." "I know," I said. "But doesn't mean they can't get lucky." Sawyer paused brushing. "You care for him." I shook my head too fast. "I barely know him." "You don't have to know a man long to care if he comes back alive." That sentence sat heavily on my shoulders. Sawyer leaned on the brush, narrowing his eyes at me. "Tell me something, missy. What are you running from? Why does everyone think I'm running?" Snap. He shrugged. "'Cause folks who ain't running don't flinch when you ask 'em." I opened my mouth, and closed it again. Sawyer nodded like he'd expected that. "Thought so." I leaned against the stall door and stared at the dirt. "I came to Copper Creek because it was quiet." "Quiet's nice," he said. "But quiet's also what folks choose when their hearts are loud." And there it was again, that truth I kept trying to bury. I ran a hand through my hair. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." "Don't rush it," Sawyer said. "Life'll tell you what it wants from you." Usually right when you're trying real hard not to listen. Before I could answer, a shout rang out from down the street. We both turned. A rider galloped toward the town square. Horse lathered, dust cloud trailing behind. People spilled out of buildings, sensing something important was happening. The rider slid off his horse before it even stopped moving. "It's the sheriff," he yelled. "They're bringing him in." My heart stopped. For a split second I couldn't breathe. Then I ran. I didn't think, didn't speak, didn't feel anything but a hollow ringing in my ears as I pushed through the growing crowd. Every horrible possibility flashed through my mind. Daniel wounded, Daniel unconscious, Daniel. I shook the thought off violently. The group of riders approached, and I scanned their faces desperately. Then I saw him, Daniel, alive, walking beside his horse, dusty, tired, shirt torn at the shoulder, but walking. My knees nearly buckled with relief. But something in the way he moved made my stomach twist. His jaw was clenched. His eyes were dark, not with exhaustion but with anger. Controlled anger. Dangerous anger. The kind a man carried only when something had gone very wrong. He glanced up and saw me. For a heartbeat we just stared at each other. No words. No breath. Just the kind of raw awareness that strips a person down to their bones. Then the crowd surged toward him, breaking the moment. "What happened, Sheriff? Did you get him? Where's the driver? Is it true they took a hostage?" Daniel lifted his hands. "We'll talk inside." He brushed past the questions and headed for his office, but paused as he reached me. His eyes scanned my face for a fraction of a second. "You stayed in town," he said quietly. I swallowed. "You asked me to." He nodded once, as if that meant something important. "Good." I opened my mouth to ask what had happened, but his expression tightened. "Give me an hour," he said, stepping back. "Then I'll tell you everything." And then he was gone, disappearing into the sheriff's office with his deputies. I stood rooted in place, my pulse thundering. He was safe. Thank God he was safe. But the relief didn't calm me, it scared me more. Because relief meant attachment. Attachment meant risk. Risk meant heartbreak. I wrapped my arms around myself as the sun dipped behind the hills. Somewhere deep inside, a small, stubborn truth rose up. I didn't just worry about him. I needed him to be alive. And needing someone was the very thing I'd sworn I'd never let myself feel again. I didn't wait the full hour. Maybe it was 10 minutes. Maybe less. Time moved strangely when your heart was a tangled mess and your thoughts kept tripping over each other. I paced in front of the sheriff's office, arms folded, trying to appear calm but failing miserably. People passed by, gave me curious glances, whispered behind their hands. Copper Creek never missed a chance to feed its gossip mill. I ignored them. Finally, after what felt like years, the office door creaked open. Daniel stepped out. His shirt had been changed, though his damp hair told me he'd washed up quickly. His eyes found mine immediately, like he'd been expecting me. "Come inside," he said quietly. I hesitated for half a second, then followed him. The sheriff's office wasn't much. Just a desk, a gun rack, 2 chairs, and a holding cell in the back that looked more decorative than necessary. But being in such a small space with him made the air feel thick. Daniel closed the door behind us with a soft thud. I faced him, trying not to show how fast my heart was beating. "What happened?" I asked. He leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. "We tracked the Hollow Creek gang to Bridle Pass. They'd already left their campsite, but they weren't far. And the driver." His jaw tightened. "We found him." I exhaled in relief. "Alive." "Barely." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "They beat him. Left him out in the sun. He was half delirious by the time we got to him." "That's awful," I whispered. His eyes lifted to mine. "It gets worse." My stomach nodded. "What do you mean?" Daniel hesitated. Really hesitated, like he was weighing something heavy in his mind. "They weren't just robbing the stagecoach," he said. "They were looking for someone." "Someone." He nodded. A woman. A chill slid down my spine. A passenger. Yes. No. Then who? Silence. Long enough silence that fear started curling at the edges of my thoughts. Daniel, I said, voice low. Tell me. He exhaled slowly, studying my face. They were asking about a woman traveling under the name Evelyn Hart. My blood stopped cold. Evelyn Hart. Name. My real name. Not the shortened version I'd given the town. Not the half-truth I'd offered Daniel. The full name attached to everything I'd left behind. How? My throat tightened. How would they know that name? Daniel watched me with an expression I couldn't read. That's what I'd like to know. My hands started to tremble. I curled them into fists to hide it. He took a step closer, not threatening but intense. Too intense. Evelyn, he said softly. Is someone looking for you? I swallowed hard. I don't know. Don't lie. The words weren't harsh. They weren't accusing. They were something else. Something that pierced straight through the walls I'd built. My breath shook. I'm not lying. I truly don't know who would be after me. But someone could be. Yes, I admitted. Someone could be. His eyes softened just barely. Your past. I turned away, pacing to the window before I could answer. My past is complicated. So is mine, he said. I looked back at him. Not like mine. You'd be surprised. Silence stretched again. Heavy. Electric. Daniel ran a hand down his face, then pushed off the desk and walked toward me. He stopped close enough that the room felt smaller. I need to know if you're in danger, he said quietly. Because if you are, the entire town could be. Guilt slammed into me like a punch. Hiding was one thing. But bringing danger to Copper Creek wasn't something I'd ever intended. I didn't know anyone was following me, I whispered. I left quietly. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I didn't run because of money or the law or anything like that. He held my gaze. Then why did you run? I opened my mouth. And for the first time since arriving in Copper Creek, I felt the truth clawing up my throat. Not the polite lie I'd told. Not the softened version I'd rehearsed. The real truth. I ran from a man, I said, voice barely above a breath. Daniel's eyes darkened. Not with jealousy but something colder. Protective. Dangerous. What kind of man? He asked. I swallowed, my voice cracking. The kind who thinks a woman is something he can buy. Daniel's jaw flexed. Did he hurt you? Not physically, I whispered. But he tried to own me. And when I left, I don't know what he did afterwards. A muscle jumped in Daniel's cheek. If he's looking for you, I'll handle it. You don't know what he's capable of. I don't care. Something inside me cracked. Something I'd been holding together with thread and denial. You can't just take on my problems, I said. I didn't come here to make yours heavier. You didn't make anything heavier. His voice deepened. You being here doesn't complicate my life. It just makes me want to protect it. My breath hitched. The room swayed slightly. The words felt too big. Too dangerous. Too real. Daniel, I whispered. Don't say things like that. Why not? Because, I breathed. Comfort is the only thing I've ever chosen. And you're not comfort. You're something else. His expression tightened like he understood exactly what I meant. You're right, he said softly. I'm not comfort. He stepped closer. I'm risk. His voice dropped. I'm consequence. Another step. I'm the thing you want but are terrified to reach for. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat because it was true. Every word of it. When I opened them, he was inches away. Evelyn, he whispered. Tell me you don't feel something. Tell me, and I'll back off. I parted my lips. And found I had no words. Not because I wanted to lie. But because the truth was bigger than both of us. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know how to run from it. I didn't answer him. Not because I didn't want to. But because the truth sat in my chest like a wild thing, beating its wings too hard for words to hold. Daniel stood there waiting, still, steady, patient in the way only a man who already knew the answer could be. His eyes searched mine with a kind of quiet intensity that felt more intimate than any touch. I finally managed a breath. "I don't know what I feel," I whispered. It was the closest thing to the truth I could give him without unraveling completely. His jaw tightened just slightly, the way it did when he was thinking too hard about something. But he didn't step back. "You don't have to know," he said softly. "Not today. Not tomorrow. Not any time soon." I swallowed, throat tight. "But you do feel something," he added. It wasn't a question. And I didn't deny it. That seemed to be enough for him, for now. Daniel finally stepped back, giving me space to breathe again. My lungs expanded slowly, painfully, as if relearning how to work. I turned away, needing distance, needing air, needing anything that wasn't his gaze burning holes into the truth I wasn't ready to face. I ran a hand across the sheriff's windowsill, feeling the worn wood beneath my fingers. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Daniel exhaled through his nose. "Now, I figure out who these men are working for. And I make sure they never get close to you. That's not your responsibility." "Maybe not," he said. "But it's what I'm going to do." His certainty rattled something inside me. Men in my past had made promises with conditions, strings, expectations. Daniel wasn't asking for anything. Not a claim. Not a price. Just offering protection like it was as natural as breathing. But protection wasn't free. Not when it came wrapped in a man like him. He studied me a moment longer. "Are you safe staying where you are tonight?" I hesitated. "I think so. I'll ride by later," he said. "Just to be sure." "Daniel." It's not up for debate. There it was again. His authority, not heavy or forceful, but anchored in something solid. Something that made my carefully built independence tremble. Before I could argue, he walked back toward his desk, signaling the conversation was over. Not dismissed, just paused. I opened the door to leave, but something made me glance back. Daniel was watching me. His expression unreadable except for one truth shining through. He was already in this deeper than he meant to be. And so was I. The evening air felt cooler than usual as I walked home. Maybe it was the desert breeze finally settling, or maybe it was the aftermath of hearing my own real name spoken aloud for the first time in months. Evelyn Hart. A name that carried 100 memories I wished would stay buried. I reached my small house on the edge of town, but instead of going inside, I sat on the porch steps. The sky bled orange into violet, the kind of sunset that stole breath even when your heart was heavy. I hugged my knees to my chest and rested my chin on them. For the first time since coming to Copper Creek, I felt exposed. Not physically, emotionally. Like every secret I'd buried was crawling toward the light one by one. And at the center of it all, Daniel. A man I had no business wanting. A man who wasn't offering comfort or sanctuary. Only truth. And truth was the most dangerous thing of all. Because truth demanded you stop hiding. Truth demanded you choose. I stared out at the horizon, thinking of Clara's words earlier. Don't sacrifice your heart for comfort. Comfort don't last. But comfort had always been my safest choice. I'd married comfort once. A man with money, power, charm, and a heart as cold as winter soil. He'd promised stability, security, a life without want. He just hadn't mentioned the cost, myself. When he realized he couldn't control my heart, he tried to control everything else instead. Leaving him had been the bravest thing I'd ever done. But bravery has a way of bruising you, even when you make it out alive. I wasn't sure I had the strength to risk that again. Not even for a man like Daniel. Especially for a man like Daniel. The sound of hooves broke through my thoughts. Low. Measured. Familiar. My pulse skittered as Daniel's horse came into view. His silhouette framed by the last colors of fading light. He stopped in front of my porch. "I told you I'd ride by," he said, voice low. "I didn't think you meant this soon." He shrugged. "Didn't feel right waiting." My chest tightened. He dismounted, tying his horse loosely to the rail. He wasn't wearing his hat, and the twilight softened every hard line of his face. "Can I sit?" he asked. I nodded, wordless. He took the step below mine, so we weren't quite eye level. No towering, no looming, just presence. Quiet, steady presence. We sat like that for a while, watching the sky dim. Finally he spoke. "You don't have to tell me everything right now," he said. "But one day, I'd like to know the whole story." I let out a shaky breath. "I'm afraid if I tell it, you'll look at me differently." "I already look at you differently," he said simply. "You being honest won't change that." That made something flutter painfully in my chest. But then he added, "And if someone's coming for you?" I stiffened. "They'll have to get through me first." Closed my eyes. The words landed too deep. Too close to the part of me that had lived without protection for far too long. It took everything in me to whisper, "You can't protect me from everything." "No," he agreed. "But I can try." The night settled around us like a soft blanket, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. Not safe, not fixed, just not alone. And that scared me more than anything, because comfort had never felt like this. And love, real love, always asked for more than comfort. The first rays of dawn filtered through the cracked window panes, casting soft light across the room where I lay awake. Sleep had been a stranger the past few nights, my mind tangled in a web of memories, regrets, and a flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Daniel was still at the sheriff's office, working on whatever mess this mystery with the Hollow Creek gang had brought into our lives. I wanted to believe he was safe. I wanted to believe I could be safe. But safety, I was learning, was a complicated promise. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat in silence, listening to the quiet creak of the house settling around me. The air was cool, crisp, the kind of morning that whispered of new beginnings even when your heart was heavy. Outside, the town was waking. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A wagon rolled past. Life was moving on, indifferent to the battles I fought within. I dressed slowly, slipping into the worn jacket Daniel had left hanging over the chair last night. The fabric smelled faintly of him, leather and something warmer like hope. I stepped outside and found the street bathed in gold, the light catching the dust like tiny stars. Daniel was already there, pacing near the sheriff's office, his boots stirring up small clouds of earth. He looked up when I approached, and for a moment we just stood there, two figures framed by morning light. "Coffee?" I asked, surprising myself. He nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I could use it." We walked to Clara's bakery side by side, not touching, but close enough that the silence between us was comfortable, not strained. Inside, the warmth wrapped around us like a promise. Clara greeted us with a knowing smile. "Morning, love-struck," she teased, sliding two steaming mugs across the counter. Daniel cleared his throat. "Not quite. Yet," I whispered, taking a sip. We sat by the window, watching the town come alive. "Last night," Daniel began, "I found something." I set my mug down, heart tightening. "What?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of cloth, dark, worn, with a faint pattern embroidered along the edge. "This was found near the gang's camp," he said. "It matches the coat a man we believe is after you was wearing." I stared at the cloth, cold settling deep in my bones. "Who is he?" I asked. Daniel hesitated. "His name's Garrett McKay. Used to work in Copper Creek, but left under complicated circumstances." My breath caught. I'd heard the name before. Whispers in saloons, warnings from strangers. "He's dangerous," Daniel said softly. "And if he's looking for you, things just got a whole lot more serious." I nodded slowly, the weight of my past pressing down like never before. "But," Daniel continued, "you're not alone in this anymore. Not now." I looked up, meeting his steady gaze. "For what it's worth," he said, "I want to fight for you. Not just to keep you safe, but because I believe you're worth it." My throat tightened. The promise felt fragile, yet stronger than anything I'd known in a long time. I swallowed hard. I want to believe that too. He reached across the table, his hand hovering near mine. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let my fingers brush his. For a moment, everything else faded, the past, the fears, the pain. All that mattered was this fragile, trembling hope. And the courage to finally choose it. The morning after Garrett McKay's name surfaced, Copper Creek felt different. Tenser, quieter, like the town itself was holding its breath. I sat on the porch, fingers wrapped tight around a steaming cup of coffee, watching the horizon as the first lights spilled across the dusty streets. Daniel was already out on his horse, scouting the edges of town with a few deputies. The weight of what was coming settled like a stone in my stomach. I didn't know if I was ready for what choosing Daniel truly meant, not just opening my heart, but standing tall when the past tried to drag me under. The sound of boots on the porch steps pulled me from my thoughts. Daniel leaned on the railing, his eyes dark and steady. "We've got a plan," he said quietly. "Garrett's expected back tonight, maybe with more men." My throat went dry. "And us. We're ready. Copper Creek's ready. I won't let him take you." I nodded, even though fear gripped me like a fist. This was the moment, when comfort ended and everything else began. That evening, the town gathered quietly at the sheriff's office. Men loaded rifles, women held lanterns, children whispered prayers. I stood beside Daniel, heart pounding. When the shadows shifted at the edge of the ridge, the gang appeared, rough, ragged, and dangerous. Gunfire cracked the night. Daniel was in front of me, steady and fierce. I gripped his arm, no longer running. When the smoke cleared, Garrett McKay lay defeated, not just by bullets, but by the courage of a woman who finally refused to be afraid. Later, as the stars blazed above us, Daniel and I sat by the fire, silence between us full but easy. He reached for my hand. "This is only the beginning," he said. I squeezed back. "Whatever comes next," I whispered, "I'm ready." Because I had finally learned that love, true love, was never about comfort. It was about risking everything for the chance to be truly alive. Weeks passed after that night, and Copper Creek slowly returned to its steady rhythm. The threat from Garrett McKay was gone, and with him, the ghosts of my past began to lose their grip. But the true battle was no longer with shadows or gunmen. It was within me. Sitting here beside Daniel, watching the sunset paint the sky with colors I never thought I'd appreciate again, I finally understand what it means to choose. Not just choosing safety or comfort. Not choosing fear or escape. Choosing love. Choosing to stand with someone who sees all your scars, and still holds your hand. Choosing to be vulnerable, messy, human. I slipped my hand into Daniel's. His fingers curled around mine, warm and sure. "You ready to stop running?" he asked softly. I smiled, feeling a peace that had nothing to do with silence, and everything to do with honesty. "I am," I said. Daniel leaned down, brushing a gentle kiss to my forehead. Home wasn't a place. It was a person. It was courage. It was love. And after all I'd lost, I finally found it. Don't forget to subscribe for next.